I'm going to try just a little bit to explain what takes to do what we're doing in the midst of our family business here. Um, it's almost impossible for me to kind of imagine even what it used to be like doing church. In my mind right now, it's unbelievable that Easter was only 1 week ago. Easter feels like many weeks ago to me for some reason, and I don't know if that's the slowness of life now or what, but the freedom of moving around in public seems like a distant life ago in some ways. As we move forward here, I am absolutely sure that we will not be having church in an on-board setting with everybody here, with anybody here, in May for sure. I don't know in terms of June. The governor's talking about extending the stay-at-home order for a period of time until we meet some gates or criteria or whatever that might be. So we're in this for a while here. We're going to continue to do live church. And so I thought I would show you, and it's only up here on the screen, so I don't know if you can see it or not, but this is what we look like here now. This is from 40 minutes ago, us running some tests on sound and video. And so Harry is over there, and I'm over here, and Judy's there. The only person you can't see is who took the picture, Dawn. And we got here today at 8:30, I guess. Harry and I and Judy and Dawn for part of the time on Friday were here for 4 hours trying some different things. Everything we're doing is different and new, and I know there's people out there who know how to do this and they have the gear for it. We're taking one step at a time. The sound quality hopefully is incrementally better. And I'm hoping that right now, if you're sitting there, that you would go, this is noticeably better sound than we've had so far, because we are now routing through, what's it called, Terry? OBS? Onboard Broadcasting System or something like that. And so now the sound's coming straight through mics, hopefully to you. So wherever you're sitting, and last I saw there was about 40 screens watching us, what I want you to do is give some applause for Harry and for Dawn and for Judy. You can do that through hearts or thumbs, hopefully not frowny or angry faces. But give them some love that they can look at later. They are putting in a lot of time. I've gotten phone calls not from Judy, that would be weird, but from Harry and Dawn and other people with ideas. Anthony McLaughlin helped us out. Grateful for everybody's support. We're doing the absolute best that we can, and we're going to be doing this for a little bit here. So I wish I could say I knew exactly when this would end. Judy just showed me her phone, and there's hearts going by. Thanks for that. Couldn't do it without these folks doing it. So I can't express how grateful I am, and for you. We go back and make sure things ran well, and so we watch through it, and it's nice to see your comments and appreciation, and so thank you also. It's been a challenge, but it's also been fun. So family business-wise, I'm going to run back on my slide because my notes were actually down here. The only other family business that we have is we're going to continue to try on the first Sundays of the month to do communion. We're going to continue to try. We're not going to pause during service for offering because that just seems odd and pretentious or strange to me. And our finances have been going well, and I'm grateful for those of you who have been doing that. What I would like personally is to know if you feel like you're getting enough church support. We've been trying to write with some regularity during the week. Terry's been doing Tuesdays with TP, and grateful for him for doing that. I know Caitlin's been helping him out on producing that, so grateful for them. the Thursday night thing that we've been doing. Is this enough? Is there something else that would be helpful for you? We're hoping you get a phone call from somebody now and then, but if there's something, set on Facebook. I know you have Facebook. Send me a message. Don't post suggestions on our webpage. That gets complicated. But send me a message on Messenger that just says, "Hey, I was thinking of this. Can't promise we'll do everything, but we're going to try to meet everybody's needs as best we can." So, skip back by our photo here. I'm going to read us our text for the morning, Luke 19, 1 through 9. If you have a Bible, grab that, and I'll give you a second to turn there. It's the Zacchaeus story, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. Starts out here in verse 1. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house." So he came down at once and welcomed him. All the people saw this and began to mutter, "He is gone to be the guest of a sinner." Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost." The title for today's sermon is Timeout or Timeout. I'll hopefully explain that a little bit as we move along here. You probably can guess a little bit. There are 2 different types of timeouts that we could be involved in, one better than the other. The thing I want to start with, though, is this. In terms of our lives right now, I've talked to lots of people, and lots of people are passing the time. I thought a couple weeks ago I shared some things that the media was saying were things we could do. I'm going to just tell you a little bit of what I've been doing. Reading. A lot more time to read. I like to keep up on the news, but I also enjoy reading books of various sorts, and so been spending some time getting caught up on my reading list. Playing a couple of games. Judy and I are home by ourselves, and we've been playing a few different board games. This one is called Pandemic Legacy. I'm not getting any royalties for this, but this game came from an original game just called Pandemic, and it's very fitting. It's about disease striking the world, and you play the role of doctors trying to solve it. The game board up here is this network of places, and 4 different viruses. Thankfully, we've only got one in our world, but 4 different viruses show up on planet Earth, and as doctors, we're rushing around trying to solve it, and it's called a legacy game because each game is different. It adds little things to it, and so the world gets more messed up and our abilities get more complicated. It's very stressful. So if you're finding anxiety to be a problem during this time, you may not want this one, but if you feel like, ooh, I want a little bit of fun trying to fight diseases, it's kind of a fun game, and so you might want to give playing a game a try. We've been doing some gardening. If you keep 6 feet away from our garden and go by our house, so you can see that we've got some plants done. We got our weeds out and that kind of thing. It's easier to get weeds dug up when you have lots of time. Building a couple of puzzles. This puzzle was one we gave my son, and he delivered it back to us. But I don't like hard puzzles, but now that we have a lot of time, it's not so bad. So spent a little bit of time building puzzles. After church today, when I get home or when one of our Facebook managers gets home, we're going to put up a question that just says, "What have you been doing with your time?" and would love to have people post just what they're doing, how they're spending the time. And it's been fun to be on Facebook with some of you. My last life, I was not very into social media, but it's been a great way for us to share some of our lives a little bit. So we're going to put up a thing that just says, how have you been passing the time at your place? And you can put on a picture if you want, and put on something else. And in the midst of passing the time, there are also changing times. We're in a world where things are different than they used to be, just how we're doing church here. It's very strange having all the chairs around the outside of the church stacked up. And you know the things that are changing. People are wearing masks just about everywhere now. I was in Safeway a couple of days ago and got a dirty, because I haven't been wearing a mask. I'm not sick, and I try to stay away from people and all that. But so I haven't worn one all the time. It's probably a little rebellion. I don't know. But I got a pretty stern look from a gal, and it's either she just didn't like me or it was because I wasn't wearing a mask. So more and more folks are wearing masks. We're washing our hands almost ad nauseum. Wash your hands for this. Judy picked up a cup that had been sitting over here for a couple of weeks, just cleaning up, and I immediately thought, boy, you better wash your hands. Even though the virus can't live on a cup for 2 weeks, it's still in my mind. And what I'm thinking has been changed. I don't know if you've gone to Costco or any of the big superstores. We went by Costco, was it yesterday, Judy, that we were out there, and we just turned around and went back. Actually, we turned and went to Home Depot, who had an equally long line, and so we didn't go to Home Depot or Costco because you now have to queue up outside just to get in. If you've been to any store, you've seen these. The stickers on the floor. It started out with just strips of tape because the market system had not yet printed 100 million stickers the size of your feet. So they just put duct tape or emergency tape. But now we're sophisticated in our social distancing, and you're supposed to stand on the little dots that are 6 feet apart. I was at Lowe's a few days ago, and they were just peeling up their duct tape and putting down, and she had it's Lowe's, they have lots of tape measures. She had a tape measure stretched to 6 feet, and the front edge of sticker 1 was exactly 6 feet from the back edge of sticker 2, which I then pointed out, that's actually 7 feet apart because the stickers are, and she didn't care. So I'm trying to be helpful, and it's not that friendly of a world sometimes. So I don't know if you've done a Zoom meeting. These are kind of fun. We may start doing some online studies if anybody wants to participate with a Zoom meeting. If you have been on one, it's kind of an interesting tension lesson of trying to speak and wait and listen and patience and all that. And then at that 40-minute point, are they going to cancel my meeting or are they going to let it go? And about 2/3 of the time, they've let us go, and occasionally they bring up the notification that you owe us money if you want to actually have a longer meeting. We were talking with the Brightons, and mid-sentence, we were vaporized and had to go all the way back in. Things are changing. Do you remember the elbow bump? How quickly that came and went? You can't elbow bump anybody from 6 feet unless you're really oddly formed. So it took the place of the handshake and the hug, and it came in, and it was absolutely required that you would not, and now it's gone. There is no more elbow bump. And I wonder 5 years from now when we look back at this, if we will even remember the elbow bump, because things moved past it so absolutely quickly. And it's an interesting thing to me how quick our society is evolving from acceptable to unacceptable things. Judy was watching a show last night while I was working on the sermon, and 2 people came on TV. They saw each other and came in and gave each other a hug, and I had a reaction, an internal reaction to seeing 2 people hugging in public on TV. And so then I wondered, when they get back so they can film television, are they going to put in the new normal, or are they going to make us long for the old normal and they'll do handshakes? I don't know. If I was a movie producer, a TV show producer, I don't know what I would do. Imagine one of the sitcoms doing actual social distancing in a non-comedic way, or what's a TV police show? Yeah, you can only get 6 feet from the corpse, or I don't know. But the world's changing, and if it will go back, I don't know how or what ways it will. But it's been a very interesting evolutionary time. And why I asked this or talk about this is, are we changing? In terms of us and our experience of our lives, other than the fact that we are conforming for this period of time, are we changing, positive or negative? Are we evolving in our internal life, in our spiritual life, and evolution in terms of this, and not macro world evolution, but just in our lives, evolution can go two directions. We can become better us or worse us in the midst of this very quickly changing time. And so my question here is, in this time where we've been put in quarantine, is it a timeout because there are things that need to be changed? Or is it a timeout where God said, we're going to have our halftime talk. We're going to give that 45 seconds. I don't know what it is in football that you get time off, and everybody gathers around and the coach says, okay, I want you to do this and this and this, and ready and break, and out we go again. Is it, in your mind and your experience so far, trouble or regrouping? And we're going to take a look at this in terms of Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of, did I say Zacchaeus entered Jericho? Maybe I said Jesus, but I meant Jesus. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man there by the name of Zacchaeus was a chief tax collector, and he was wealthy. So you have this tax collector, wealthy guy, and most of us have heard about him, know him, that if you're a Roman tax collector, and he was Jewish, but if he's collecting taxes for the Romans, he's absolutely hated. He's betrayed his countrymen. He's robbing from people, because that's how it worked. You would basically extort and threaten and intimidate as much money out of people as you could get. And he was not only a tax collector, he was the chief tax collector. He organized the thuggery that was going on, and that's why it says he was wealthy. He had accumulated vast wealth at the expense of his countrymen. Now, he's in Jericho. Jesus is on his way and going to pass through. He's heard about Jesus. He's never seen him before, but the message about this Jesus guy has been spreading around town, and it gets there actually ahead of Jesus, that Jesus is on his way. So the word is spreading quickly, and Zacchaeus, even though he's sort of a betraying Jew, is fascinated somehow about this man. It says he wants to see him. So it moves on. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, so he's a little guy, he could not see over the crowd. So there's actually a big crowd lining the road. This is absolutely the opposite of what we can do now. These are people packed in and crowded. It's kind of like being at Pike Place Market back in the day. Everybody's wedged in. And then imagine that some movie star or somebody shows up at the market, and all of a sudden everybody's crowding around to try and see, just to get a look at Jesus. Crowds are dense. They see Zacchaeus is kind of trying to duck in between people, trying to see who Jesus is. He wants to just be able to see a glimpse of him. And certainly because he's not well liked, he's catching an elbow in the chops, and people are squeezing together so he can't see. And so he decides that he's going to find another way. And so it's here, he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. So Zacchaeus works out in his mind, I'm sick of getting bumped and kicked and hit and disliked, and so I'm going to sneak ahead a little ways. I'm going to climb up a tree, and then I can see Jesus when he passes by. So Jesus gets to the spot that he's at, and it says this: when Jesus reached the spot, right where Zacchaeus is, there's a tree off to Jesus' left, and Zacchaeus is up in that tree, and Zacchaeus has never met Jesus. Jesus never met him, but he stops and he says, not just, hey, dude, come down. He calls him by name. He knows who he is, which is meaningful. That Jesus, always personal, always caring. In the midst of this massive crowd, there's this one guy who needs Jesus eye to eye. And he stops and he looks up in the tree and he says, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house. And that line there, I must stay at your house. Is Jesus he's not saying, hey, I've got an idea. He's stating it straight out. I'm coming to your place. And there's something to learn here in terms of just how Jesus operates, because we have been given the commission to operate as Jesus did. There's some times when we know what needs to happen. We know somebody needs to have some time with us, and maybe you find that they're too busy and they don't return your text or whatever it might be. And Jesus doesn't mess around at all. He stops there, he calls him by name, he says, get down here, I've got to get together with you. And there is something for us to learn of taking a certain level of spiritual authority in people's lives and saying, boy, I know this person needs some contact right now. And that's what Jesus is doing. So, Zacchaeus comes down. Zacchaeus, he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. He was happy to hear that Jesus was going to have lunch with him. It moves on into verse 7. Some time passes here. We can read this incorrectly. All the people saw. This is not when Jesus starts talking to Zacchaeus. This is after the fact. So there's a time transition that happens that Scripture just kind of, the authors of the Gospels didn't put in anything that wasn't necessary. But why we know this, all the people saw this, and look at their statement. He has gone to be the guest of a sinner. And the next verse is Zacchaeus will actually reply back to it. So this is in the context of the meal at Zacchaeus' house has happened. The people who knew this certainly followed. We see this in several places in Scripture where the crowds just follow Jesus around. And so Zacchaeus and Jesus go off to Zacchaeus' place, which I'm guessing was a pretty nice pad. But they wait outside. And they start to complain. He has gone to be the guest of a sinner. Now, I'm going to pause here. It's important what this line has just been said, but I was with somebody the other day, and they made a comment that our church is fairly senior, that we're above the median age, perhaps, let's say. I commented on this when I came on full-time a couple years ago, and it was commented that we were getting a younger pastor, and I'm in my mid-50s. We're mature folks. And so a younger person made a comment that it's sort of, when you listen to us talk, it does feel a little above 40. So, he has gone to be the guest of sinners, and we're going to work on this right now. This is a bonus lesson. What we have to say, because it's true, and it's a little washed out, but it says, true dat. Okay? This phrase, and I want you to say it. I've seen a couple folks who are online there. So when I say he has gone to be the guest of a sinner, and you know that's true, so Brighton's right there in your house. I want you guys to do this. Mummerts, if you're there. Who else did I see? It was on the Plankoviches. I thought you guys come on. I'm going to say it, and then you turn to somebody near you and you say, true dat. Okay, so he has gone to be the guest of a sinner. True dat. And true dat means this. It's internet slang. It's chat texting and subculture. Those are the terms that it comes up with. True, T-R-U, you can't have a U on it, so make sure when you're pronouncing it, you say it correctly. True. I don't know what the E sounds like. And it's dat, not that. And it means that is true, I agree. Okay? And it matters because we want to be relevant to our culture. So if I was preaching and I said that he has gone to be the guest of a sinner and Dennis Rodman was sitting in the back, Dennis Rodman, who's a mature older guy, he would say, true dat, bro. Okay? So I want us to begin to be more hip, because you're doing church with your kids at home now. And kids, you're there, and you can look at your parents right now and you say, Mom, Dad, you guys are old. Because that's true. True dat, see? True dat. Now don't rub it in, kids. Just know they're old, and they're going to try. So they're going to start saying, when you say something that's true, your mom and dad, they're going to say, true dat. So Zacchaeus had been a sinner. That's absolutely critical to this story. It is true. He had been a sinner. He had abused his own people. He had stolen from them. He had taken impoverished people and made them more poor. He had taken his wealth and not helped anybody. He had built himself a wealthy world around him. And that's what that, when it says he was wealthy, it's saying he lived a wealthy to the point of abuse lifestyle Zacchaeus had. Now imagine that's you and Jesus, who you've heard about but haven't seen, so you don't necessarily know the amazing grace that he has. And Jesus is coming up the street, and you've heard he's authoritative. You've heard a little bit about how he has set the Sadducees and the Pharisees and the teachers of the law. He has taken them on, and you've heard that he doesn't pull any punches. And he's coming, and you're up in the tree. You're thinking, I'm glad I'm in a tree. And you're probably a little bit behind some branches so that you can see him, and you don't think he's going to see you. Now imagine he stops at the tree and says, Zacchaeus, come down here immediately. Now I flash back immediately to my childhood. When my dad or mom were upset, they would use the word immediately, and they would use my middle name, which is Scott. I used to tell my students my middle name was David, so my name would be David Davies, and they believed me, but it's not. It's Scott. And my dad would say, David Scott, get over here immediately, or mow the lawn immediately, because I was supposed to do it later. That word immediately to me meant I was in trouble. I was in the doghouse. I was set up and ready for a timeout. Now, my family was not a timeout family. My family was a bored family. Not bored like we didn't do much. A board was in the kitchen drawer, the bottom kitchen drawer. I can still picture it. There's 4 drawers. The bottom drawer had about a 2.5-foot board that was about 3 inches wide and about 1.25 inches thick, and it had bottom written on it, which I still think borderlines on abuse. But when I was really in for it, because I had done something wrong, the drawer opened, and so I would have given money for a timeout, because I got the bottom board. Now, when we got older, my mom, she was more like Jesus, actually, than my dad was. She didn't like that, so she got a wooden spoon, which was it was pathetic, but we acted like it hurt. The point here, when Jesus says to Zacchaeus, "Come down immediately," maybe Zacchaeus' first thought was, "I'm dead. He's going to read me the riot act, legitimately. He has called the teachers of the law vipers. What's he going to say to me?" So his thinking probably was, I'm in for it, and I deserve it. It wasn't probably, let's go have a quick rally and get back in the game. But that's what it was. The meeting that Jesus wanted to have. Now, we have no record of it. Did Jesus at some point say to him, "Look, Zach, this has been how you've lived"? He may have, but it isn't certainly where he ended. He may have said, this first part of lunch, before the main course comes out, because in Zacchaeus' house there's certainly been a multi-course meal, probably between the appetizers and the whatever comes after that. I don't know. I've never been that rich. But somewhere in there, Jesus probably did say, "Brother, you haven't done it right." Which he could say to me, he could say to anyone in this room, and he could say to any one of you. There's some things that haven't gone right. And he'd be absolutely right in saying it. But I think the fascinating thing about Jesus, when he is corrective to anybody who's not religious, is it's full of grace. It's full of compassion. It's full of mercy. He simply will say, stop doing that. Go and sin no more. Where is the one that condemns you? Nobody. I don't either. Just stop. So there might have been a little moment of timeout in in the home there, but the gist and the bulk of it, I believe, was this kind of timeout. It was how are we going to do this from here on out? You wanted to see me, Zacchaeus, you wanted to see Jesus Christ without even knowing it. Because you know you need to do stuff differently. So here's what Zacchaeus, remember those guys said, he's gone to have lunch with a sinner. The next verse, verse 8. Look at that first word, but. See, Zacchaeus could have gotten all defensive. This is how we know those statements are coming after the lunch. They might have been going on all during the lunch, but they're relevant to us after the lunch because Zacchaeus is back there with them. He is back there with these folks who believe he is absolutely beyond redemption, and yet Zacchaeus, when he hears them saying, yeah, he went to have lunch with Zacchaeus recognizes that is probably a fair thing to say. This holy man who is teaching truth and justice and salvation is going to have lunch with me. This is pretty close equivalency to going and having lunch with the prostitutes. That Jesus didn't care at all about the moral quality of the people that he was going to go with. He cared about the potential of the people he was going to go with. And so when Jesus is having lunch, Zacchaeus is knowing they have every right to think, why would this holy man have lunch with this person? But Zacchaeus responds back, but. He's acknowledging the truth of what they're saying. I'm a sinner. I've done things wrong. But Zacchaeus stood up. He takes an action. He gets up in front of these people who are his justifiable accusers and says, look, Lord. He stands up with these people accusing him, and he says it specifically. He's not going to reply to the crowd, and we need to learn this, not to try and defend ourselves to the people. We need to present ourselves to the Christ. He stands up, talks to Jesus and says, look, Lord. And look what he says. Here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I've cheated anybody out of anything, I'll pay back 4 times the amount. He's an extremely wealthy guy. He's not only giving away half of what he has, he's going to pay back those he's cheated, which is everybody, 4 times as much. It shows you how his wealth is compounded. So he's fabulously wealthy, but that's not even the issue anymore. He says, I'm going to start today, and I'm going to do it differently. Now, for us, here's why I bring this up today. In terms of the stay-at-home order, we're somewhere around halfway. I think just a little bit past, unless they extend it, but we're kind of at halftime. Or maybe we're just past halftime, and we have a timeout here, a long timeout. This is a TV timeout with an added-on break at the end of it. We've got a lot of time on our hands, and it doesn't have to be a person in the corner. It can be. This can be, based on our decision, we've just been made to stand in the corner. But it doesn't have to be. We have a choice. So I'm going to put up and ask 4 questions that I think will help us make a distinction between whether we're having a timeout in a sports analogy and we're just getting a pep talk on how to do this right, or we're having a stand in the corner because we can refuse to do things the way they're supposed to be done. So here's the 4 questions. What are you learning right now about yourself? This is you under a microscope because of where you're at and the tensions that are going on. The number of people I've talked to just this week that are feeling that tension accumulate. When I taught psychology in high school, one of the things that's true about stress is it stacks up. One stress on top of another, on top of another. And that's why something will happen. You'll think, well, why did that one thing set me off? It's because there's 12 things underneath it. Stress stacks. And all of the things that we've used to sort of moderate our stress and ease it out into the world somehow have been taken from us for a period of time. You can't go to the gym. You can't go for a hike with your friends. You can't just sit and have coffee with somebody. Those things that help us sort of filter ourselves out have been taken away, and now there's you under a microscope. It's still you, but you're getting to see a little bit more of you turned up. So what are you learning about yourself? I can tell you, for me, one thing I've learned is I would never say I'm a disciplined person. I'm not an undisciplined, I'm not just a raging lunatic or anything, but I bounce around from things. When I do hobbies, I do them for 20 or 30 minutes. When I read, I do it for 20 or 30 minutes, and I do this, and I move to that. Even when I'm preparing my sermon, I'll work on it for 30 or 40 minutes, and then I've got to do something else, and I come back. I'm not particular, but I'm actually learning I'm less disciplined than I thought, because I don't know why, but I am. And I know it's something that I have to work on in this time period, or it's going to continue to be that way after this time period. So what are you learning about yourself? And I would encourage you to take some personal time that you have and write things down. Earlier in this service, I said that the things that God has done, and sometime we'll all share them. There are a few things that happened early in this that absolutely the hand of God. I'll try to remember to tell. It has to actually do with Harry and how Harry could have killed us all, which certainly we've thought before, but this time it was more true. It's amazing, but we don't have time really for today. I'll tell it. I'll try to remember to tell it next week. But what are you learning about yourself? And write these things down so that you can remember them later. How will you be different? This is going to end. And actually, I think this is a little bit of a problem that's going to happen, is it's going to end really slowly. It started really fast. Boom! I got home from Thailand. We did one church service, and the next church service we're talking about, we got to shut things down. And we did. And after that, boom, you got to stay at home. And now I've been staying at home. I didn't have time to sort of talk through with my kids, how are we going to manage this, and give them 15 hugs they could store up. Nothing. Just boom, started. But it's going to bleed out. We're going to ease back in a little bit at a time, and there's a problem with that because we can carry some of these things into that we're supposed to have gotten a hold of and not, and slowly ease back into life and forget all of it. And that would be tragic. How will you be different? For me, for example, I know that I have to, in my personal time, which I have way more of now, I have to be more mentally specific about what I want to do with periods of time. I have to, or all of a sudden I'll be like, wow, where did that day go? I remember lunch, and now I'm done with dinner. And that's because I have to be more specific and intentional. And so when I say this next one's going to seem funny, but how will you be different? And what I have found with people is when we're non-specific, we don't do it. So I'm changing the question. What will you do differently? A specific thing. What will you do differently after we're done here? How do you want to be changed? Now, Jerry wrote an article about this virus, which we're going to send out to the church here pretty soon. And it's very interesting and very factual in terms of so many folks think of this virus in terms of the hand of the enemy. And Jerry points out exactly right that every plague that takes place in the Bible came from God. Every single one of them. Absolutely true. It's worth us thinking about. What's he trying to accomplish? And we could think, what's he trying to accomplish internationally and globally? But I think he actually cares a lot more about what's he trying to accomplish with you than with me. What will you do differently because of what you've learned about yourself in this microscope time? So what will you do differently? And this last one, these might all seem like they fit the same thing. They do, but when I was in education, they made us do SMART goals, which it's a weird concept, but essentially what a SMART goal is that it's a specific thing you're going to do, and there's a way you can measure that you did it, and then you do. And I found out my goals weren't very smart a lot of times. How will you accomplish what you know you're supposed to do? This isn't just about I need to read my Bible more. This isn't just about I need to pray more. This is about how do you want to be as a follower of Christ. I'm making an assumption here that when you hit pause and you stop and you think and you go, okay, when I die, what I hope my priorities were as viewed in my life, not an intellectual statement. My first priority is God, and my second's my family, and my third's my friends. But when I look at my life, will they be able to see what my priorities were? And then how will you accomplish that? How are you going to change your life based on this? Because I don't know very many things, but I absolutely believe this in terms of this pandemic. God wants me different when it's done. He wants my ministry different. He wants my time organization different. He wants my encourageability different. I have learned a lot of things, which I won't go into now. If you ever want to have lunch, I'd be happy to tell you many of them. Not all of them, but many of them. And I hope you are too. Zacchaeus came out of that tree without knowing he was going to give away half of his stuff. But what he did do is he went and spent focused time with Jesus. And when he spent that focused time with Jesus, he left a changed man. And he had very specific things he was going to do. He didn't deny his old self. When they said Jesus went to have lunch with a sinner, all Zacchaeus said is, yeah, but look at me now. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to give away half my wealth. I'm going to pay back 4 times what I've stolen from any man. I don't feel God's calling me to give away half my wealth or to pay anybody back because I don't know anybody I've stolen from. But I have some very specific things that I know God said that I've learned about myself, that I want to be different, and that I need to do specific things to change. And so I'm going to ask you, you have the time. It'll be absolutely tragic if come June, July, September, next January, you get back to your life and you're exactly the way you were before. And the only way that'll change is if you engage with God and say, God, what do you want me to do? This is not an accidental timeout, but it can be a very intentional pep talk. God saying, let's do this right. Let's get after it and do it right. Amen? Amen.